We now invite Mr. John Seago to come up. He's the Legislative Director for Texas Right to Life. His department is responsible for conducting research and analysis, lobbying in the state capital as a pro-life advocate. He's a graduate of Trinity International University, and his prior experience before joining TRTL includes teaching logic, rhetoric, government, and economics at Payday Classical School. I would say that's very good training to be a lobbyist in Austin, don't you?
Yeah.
Mr. Seago's subject today will be addressing pro-life laws in Texas and how to lobby effectively at the state capitol.
Thank you. I'm going to be talking about two things this afternoon, and so we're going to be talking about the pro-life victories that we've had so far. Earlier this morning, Jim Graham, our executive director at Texas Right to Life, mentioned that the pro-life movement is winning, that we are actually heading in the right direction. And I want to provide a little bit of clarity and some concrete examples of the victories that we have had, legal victories we have had, and then also how we can continue to win, how we can continue to have victories in the legislature. So my name is John Seago. I serve as the Legislative Director for Texas Right to Life. And as Jim mentioned, we have the unique position of spearheading the legislative effort in Austin, in the Texas legislature. And we get to work with pro-life leaders, elected officials, to shape the agenda, to shape what actual bills we'll be voting on, we'll be trying to get moved through the legislative process. And it's not easy, and so our job is to do the research, to prepare the actual language of the bills, and then to lobby for and support those bills to passage in the Capitol during the session every other year. So in January of 2015, in just a few months, we will be moving back into Austin, and we have our full legislative team moves into Austin, and we're there every day during the session for 140 days at least. It's been kind of drawn out a few times, but at least 140 days, and we're there working with our elected officials trying to pass legislation that will protect pregnant women, preborn children, and vulnerable patients. So, but I want to talk first about where we've been as a state and kind of the victories that we have legally. Jim talked about this morning, Jim Graham talked about whenever the Supreme Court decided Roe v. Wade and the case that went with it, Doe versus Bolton, when the Supreme Court decided that the pro-life leaders, even those who believed in the sanctity of human life, innocent human life, didn't fully grasp the magnitude of that decision, didn't fully grasp what battle was beginning in 1973 and that would continue here. And this was very similar, and you can see this on the legal side, is that the pro-life movement tried to pass a human personhood bill for about 15 years. The pro-life movement was stuck on one legal strategy. And we're trying to think of, okay, the Supreme Court has said this, that elective abortions shall be legal, and this is the Supreme Court's decision, and all we need to do is change the Constitution, or put something in the Constitution, or pass something federally. And that was kind of the mindset for about 15 years, and that's no longer the mindset. The mindset now is, as pro-life leaders and lawyers have seen the magnitude of the challenge we have before us, we've adopted a more complex legal strategy. We know that this is not going to be a one bill, this is not going to be a silver bullet that Congress can do or that states can do. And so there are several types of pro-life laws. There's not one type of pro-life law. We'll get to this in just a second. So what we have here is that there are several categories of pro-life laws, and that's what we see in Texas. Texas right now is the envy of the country as far as pro-life legislation goes, because we do have fantastic laws on the books. We do have great pro-life laws that show that we value the preborn child, that we want to protect pregnant women from a predatory abortion industry, and that we want and that we care for those individuals and we want to protect them by law. And so it's not just a one law. We have several different categories of laws. And I want to show you, we have, I'm not going to go through all of them for the sake of time, but there are several things I want to highlight in our history. If you want the full list of pro-life laws and kind of the history of Texas, I can send this to you. It's kind of listing out all the laws that we've passed. And I'm not bragging. This was not me. As you know, I'm the youngest one that's been up here so far. And that's not wasted on me. I have, you know, I'm very honored to stand on the shoulders of the pro-life leaders that have been fighting this fight even before I was born. So that's not wasted on me. So a lot of these is not me bragging. It's talking about the pro-life movement, how successful it's been in Texas. What we have, though, is several different types of pro-life laws. We have some pro-life laws that seek to minister to the woman, seek to protect the pregnant woman, who is usually a victim as well of the abortion industry, is a victim of our culture of death that's convinced her that she needs this procedure. So we have laws that go directly to the woman, like informed consent laws. Texas has a very strong informed consent law that before the woman seeks an abortion, before the woman can have an abortion, that the abortionist provide her with a booklet. Provide her with a booklet that has information about the development of her preborn child, that talks about, actually describes the abortion procedures, that describes the complications and the risks with each of the procedures. And in these booklets, it also has pictures, colored pictures, every 2 weeks of the development, showing what that baby, either an actual picture that we have from medical textbooks or a drawing. So we have this Women's Rights Notebooklet. It also has a resource guide to show to the numbers and addresses of pregnancy centers around the state that are dedicated. Don't put my audience to sleep. Remember, turn the lights off. This could be dangerous. All right, we're with you. A resource packet that could show you where these pro-life ministries are. And I know some of the pro-life ministries that are represented here are essential to the pro-life movement to minister to that pregnant woman, not just keeping her from ending the life of her child, but also helping her decide, figure out why she should make that life-affirming decision. So the Women's Right to Know Act actually did that. It actually put those materials in pregnant women's hands. Another pro-woman law that we have in Texas that is one of the strongest in the country is the sonogram law that was passed in 2011. In 2011, Texas Right to Life helped shape the strongest pro-life sonogram law in the country. And it's the strongest because although other states have sonogram legislation, our law has to clarify, first, the abortionist has to do a sonogram before the procedure. The abortionist or someone who's highly trained has to do that sonogram. Then second, they have to display the image so that the woman can see. And this is where a lot of other states failed in doing this, is that they just required the abortionist to do the sonogram, not necessarily to show it to her. So they could fulfill the law, do the sonogram, and the woman has no idea what has happened. So our law clarifies you have to display it in a manner she can see. Now, she still has the constitutional right to look away. Like whenever you're on an airplane, when you're flying, how many people actually listen to those safety instructions when you're sitting in your seat and the stewardess is sitting there and she's explaining where all the exits are and she's explaining how to buckle a seatbelt because we have all forgotten about that. She's sitting there and she's giving her explanation, and she's required by law to do that. She has to tell you where the exits are. The law requires her to do it. However, if you put in your headphones, you're not going to go to jail. You're not going to get a fine if you don't pay attention to what she says. And the sonogram bill is similar in the sense that we are not forcing the woman to listen, but we are forcing that abortionist who we don't trust to follow the law, to explain, to display the sonogram, and then to explain several features of it. And then the last thing, so that was the last part of the sonogram bill, is that he has to point out several features. And we have to be very, and it came up earlier, we have to be very specific about what we're expecting to happen. Because, again, we are talking about an individual who is their job is to take human lives away. And so we're not exactly trusting the moral judgment of these individuals we're writing the laws for. So we have to be as clear and as specific as possible so that enforcement can occur, that women are actually getting this information that is critical to her decision. So that was the sonogram bill in 2011 at the bottom there. We also have legislation on the books that talks about the providers, the abortion providers. You know, we had to pass a law, and this is kind of just common sense. We had to pass a law that required licensed physicians to do abortions. And even though that's common sense, and there's not a whole lot of other areas of medicine that had to be, clarified, a lot of states after Roe v. Wade had to clarify that you can't have someone who went to a seminar, or you can't have someone who was almost a doctor but never was licensed do an abortion. So we have these protections that are talking about providers, and the majority of House Bill 2, which we passed last year, dealt with provider requirements, and I'll talk about that in just a second. We also have, on our law, we have citizen protections. We have conscience protections, and we have taxpayer protections. Another huge victory in 2011 was that we stopped more than $64 million from going to the abortion industry. As pro-life taxpayers, you were actually funding the abortion. Yeah, $64 million. As taxpayers, as pro-life taxpayers, you were actually funding an immoral institution, an industry that actually put it's at the center of its business model, selling abortions to vulnerable women. And so we were supporting that with our taxpayer dollars. And in 2011, we adopted 4 different policies that kept that taxpayer money from going from this industry. Now, there's still some work to be done on that. The abortion industry is very clever, and it was obviously their prerogative to look at all of our laws and find the cracks and find where they can still get some taxpayer money. And so they are still receiving taxpayer dollars, but it's closer to $2 million a year rather than more than $64 million a year. So last year, everyone heard about House Bill 2, and I'm quickly just going to explain what was in House Bill 2 before we move on. House Bill 2 was a historic victory. It really was. And there was a lot of media coverage, and there was a lot of, everyone was talking about it, and it was not just rhetoric. It was truly a victory, something to be proud of. We passed one bill that had 4 different policies in it. And so even though it was just one bill, it was House Bill 2, it had 4 specific rules. And like I mentioned earlier, 3 of the rules had to do with the abortion provider. It required that the individual who's doing the abortion, the abortionist, that he has admitting privileges at a local hospital, meaning that he's gone to a local hospital and proved to his peers, his medical peers, that he actually is trained and qualified and has not disqualified himself by any wrongful action to be doing this procedure in the first place. We found that in Texas, we had a lot of abortionists who were not trained as an OB-GYN. They were not formally trained anywhere to do abortionists. They had just been doing abortions for more than a decade, and that was their experience. That was their education, was kind of a self-taught abortionist. And so we required that they have admitting privileges, and a lot of those doctors who were self-taught or never formally trained, they couldn't get a local hospital to give them privileges, to say that if there is a complication, if there is something that goes wrong, that they will cover for that abortionist and continue to care for that woman. So we see the admitting privileges section of the law. We also see that in House Bill 2, there was a requirement about the building itself that the abortion is done in. And so this required that every abortion clinic follow a set of rules that had already been drawn out that other day surgery centers follow. So if you go and you get laser eye surgery, or if you go and get plastic surgery, or something like that, you will be going to a clinic that already follows a set of rules called ambulatory surgical center, requirements. And we said that an abortion clinic has to follow those set of rules, already existing set of rules. And that was the second part of House Bill 2. The third part had to do with chemical abortions. It clarified the protocol that an abortionist used whenever he's not doing a surgical abortion, but he's using deadly chemicals to kill the preborn child. And what happens there, that we gave them 2 sets of rules that they could follow, and these would make sure that the abortion clinic was actually following approved standards when using these extremely dangerous drugs, not just for the baby, but also for the woman. And then the last part of House Bill 2, and arguably the most important, is about the preborn pain section. And this last part of House Bill 2 actually creates a state interest in preborn child, in a specific category of preborn children. It looks at the medical evidence and it sees that there's evidence, and there has been medical journals and research and studies on the experience of pain, and whether these preborn children, whether these tiny humans can feel pain. And so there's this medical discussion going on, and they've established that at least by 20 weeks post-fertilization, that there is enough evidence to say that at least by 20 weeks, it can be confirmed that these preborn children feel pain. So there's three main categories of evidence, but I won't go into that now. But we're looking at the science. So what we said is, okay, with this new medical information, with this new technology that we didn't have in '73, Texas is making a statement. Texas is saying that we have found a class of individuals that we want to protect, that we think it's in our interest to protect, and that is preborn children who are capable of feeling pain. And so a follow-up on that state interest is to actually prohibit elective abortions on that class of individuals. So now in Texas, and this is being enforced today, and it was never taken to court, which is extremely important. It was never even challenged in court because this is the right conversation, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But right now today, preborn children who are capable of feeling pain past 20 weeks are protected by Texas law, and they cannot be aborted in our state. That's a huge difference. So when Texas Right to Life looks at what types of bills we should pass, we're not just kind of seeing what other states are doing. We're not just looking at what bill would be easiest to pass. We actually have a criteria, and I want you to show you it real quick before we move on to actual lobbying, just so you know there is a method behind what bills Texas Right to Life supports. Not all pro-life bills are created equal. There are great bills. There are great bills that have a pro-life conviction behind them that will not be supported by Texas Right to Life because they will not save lives. And I'll show you exactly what we look at. Usually I present this to college students, so it's kind of zoomy and trying to catch your attention, so I hope I don't make anybody sick. All right, there we go. So if you're still awake, you might feel a little queasy. All right, so these are the 3 criteria that we use whenever we look at a pro-life bill. And so all of those bills that I mentioned before that Texas Right to Life has worked on, this is the criteria that we look at. Thinking of a pro-life bill that has a great conviction behind it would be allowing pregnant women in HOV lanes. Okay? Right now we don't do that, but if we passed a law that allowed pregnant women to drive in HOV lanes, that's a pro-life bill, right? Because what the state's doing is saying, hey, that's not just one human being in the car, that's actually 2 human beings. That's a pro-life bill. However, that would not be at the top of my legislative agenda next year because of this criteria. It's a great bill. But given the problems with our government, that it is a conservative government, and that it is difficult to pass a pro-life bill, that's not one we're going to waste our efforts on. We're not going to keep bothering you and sending you emails and calling you and trying to get you in the Capitol for a bill that will not do these 3 things. And these 3 things, just quickly, is first, directly save preborn lives. Although the HOV lane bill may be inspirational and it may create some good conversations, it's not going to save anyone's life. No one's going to decide not to have an abortion just so they can go in the HOV lane, right? Okay. So our bills have to directly save preborn lives. And the preborn pain section actually did that. Because the preborn pain section said there are abortions that are happening the day before this bill is enacted that will not be allowed, that will be illegal after enactment. So the directly saved lives. The second one is it moves the cultural conversation in the right direction. Does this bill move the cultural conversation in the right direction? Now, the HOV lane, it's a great conversational piece, right? Yeah, because some people will be like, why in the world would you want to pass that law? Well, then you can talk about two human beings that the law should protect, okay? The preborn pain section, the preborn pain bill actually does this also, because what it does is it moves the conversation not about abortionists, not about abortion drugs or the building that the abortion is done in, but it moves the conversation right to the heart of the abortion debate, which is that preborn child, that innocent human life that is vulnerable and being neglected by the practice of elective abortion. So the preborn pain section makes us talk about this, talk about that preborn child, and even the media who bashed our bill from the day it was filed to the day that it was signed. Well, let's be honest, they're still bashing it when they get a chance. They keep talking about how this bill is terrible, how this it's a bad bill, it's just going to hurt women. But what is the question of every article that covered our bill? Do preborn children feel pain? Now, they attack our science, they attack the more than 90 peer-reviewed studies that we printed out for them in big folders and handed them to them. They doubt all of the science, and they come up with their Texas Medical Association spokesperson to talk about how this is bad science. They can do that, but at the end of the day, the cultural conversation, what the people who are actually watching the news or reading the newspaper are thinking of, well, does that preborn child feel pain? That's a humanizing factor. That's not the only important factor. That's not the only thing, but that's at least moving it in the right direction. Our bills don't have to finish the conversation, but we want our bills to have the conversation move in the right direction. And the last one is, will this bill, the third principle here, so we have directly saves lives, moves the cultural conversation in the right direction. And the third one is, does this bill positively contribute to the overturn of Roe? We have to, because our ultimate goal is to overturn a Supreme Court decision, we have to be mindful of that. Every piece of legislation that we pass, we have to think, how is this going to affect our ultimate goal? How is this going to affect in getting the Supreme Court to return this question to the states? Okay, we are working in the shadow of Roe v. Wade. It is a harsh reality, but we can't ignore it. That is our ultimate goal, and every bill that we pass, whether it's pro-life or not, whether it has a pro-life conviction behind it or not, is going to get us closer to overturning Roe or getting us further away. So this requires a lot of prudence, and this requires a lot of legal research, and that's why Texas Right to Life is involved with National Right to Life. And that's why we're interacting with them, interacting with other states. We're reading other court opinions that are on the other side of the country to make sure that we are using prudence. Prudence is the top cardinal virtue, right? It's actually the dominant cardinal virtue. Prudence is necessary whenever we move forward with a legal strategy. And Texas Right to Life and National Right to Life have a legal strategy that will overturn Roe v. Wade and return the question back to the states so that we can protect the most vulnerable among us legally. Okay, so that's a little crash course about where we are legally. I can send you this information if you want. I know it's a lot. But I want to talk, and they also asked me to talk about lobbying real quick. So I want to take a survey among everyone here. So you'll stand up. Talking about political involvement. So, if you have voted before, if you've ever voted before, please stand up.
It's good to stand up.
Okay?
Perfect timing, John.
Alright. If you have ever voted, we're talking about political involvement. Alright, stand up or raise your hand. Okay. Now, if you have not emailed or called an elected official sit down. So if you have voted and you called or emailed an elected official, stay standing. Okay? All right. Now, if you have, that includes, I guess, Facebook. We can throw Facebook and Twitter in there. If you've ever tweeted at an elected official, you can say so. Okay. Now, if you've never visited the Capitol, sit down. So if you have voted, you've called a representative, and you've visited the Capitol before, you should stay standing. Okay? I didn't lose many people. Good. All right. If you've ever personally met an elected official, stay standing. If you've never personally met an elected official, sit down. Okay? Good. All right. If you've ever lobbied your elected officials, stay standing. Lobbying meaning telling them you want them to do something, asking them their position on something. Okay, good. If you feel like you've ever successfully lobbied an elected official, stay standing up. I know, I just lost some people. Oh, I lost some of my colleagues. You say, I talked to that pro-choice elected official all day long, and they didn't change their mind. Okay, well, these are great citizens still standing up. So I guess the last one, if you've ever run for an elected position yourself, stay standing up. Nope. Anyone run? Okay. Oh, we have one. Sir, you win. You win this. What position was it? What position did you run for? School board. School board. Excellent. Elected official. Well, thank you very much. All right. Well, that was pretty good. Sometimes I'm in rooms, and as soon as I say, if you've done more than tweeting your elected official, everyone sits down. Oh, we have another?
No, it's over here.
Oh, what position?
State representative.
State representative. Excellent. Very good. So we have a politically involved audience here, which is good, because it will make my job a little bit easier. All right. So every pro-life bill, all of the bills that I talked about earlier that I mentioned, every pro-life bill has a story. There are political wins, there are political disputes, grudges, fights. There's something going on under the Capitol that's really dominating the political conversation. Each pro-life bill has a cultural context. What was in the news? Some of our pro-life laws that we talked about came on the heels of an important media story or something that happened that was catching everyone's attention. We had the Kermit Gosnell case before last session that highlighted the poor conditions of abortion clinics. We had the Gosnell of Houston came. Douglas Carpin was another abortionist who was accused of doing heinous things in his abortion clinic. That was our kind of cultural conversation before we even got to the bills. Every bill has this specific context, but what each pro-life bill has behind it is pro-life advocacy. No pro-life bill will ever pass without pro-life activists working for that bill. Pro-life bills do not naturally pass. Pro-life bills don't even naturally pass or pass on their own because you have pro-life elected officials in Austin. And most definitely, pro-life bills do not pass just because we have a bunch of Republicans in Austin. The one reason that pro-life victories come to existence, that we can have a list to be proud of, that we can have victories like House Bill 2 to be proud of, is because of pro-life citizens like you to pass this. Pro-life activism, pro-life lobbying is extremely important because these things do not happen on their own. There is a fallacy in Texas, and I'm sure some of you have possibly been tempted to believe this fallacy, that if we get a majority of Republicans in both chambers, we get majority in the House and majority in the Senate. If we get our elected officials, our statewide elected officials to be Republican, our governor, our lieutenant governor, our attorney general, if we get them all to be pro-life, it will just happen. Pro-life victories will just start rolling in automatically. That's not the case. We see that no pro-life victory has ever been easy. So we do need you, and that's why I thank Phil for putting this on the agenda of how to lobby effectively. We do need you. And there are a couple of principles I want to give you, just very practically, very concrete things. And the biggest one is that you are effective. The first point is that you are more effective than I am, actually. You pro-life citizens coming to the Capitol and meeting with their elected officials will be far more effective than a lobbyist. Now, I'm a good lobbyist. I'm not that kind of lobbyist, but I'm still a lobbyist. That is my job. I'm there every day. And so me sitting down with an elected official is less influential, less powerful than a regular citizen who's decided to use their spring break to come up to the Capitol, who's decided to bring the kids and make it a field trip to come and meet their elected officials and tell their elected officials what political issues are most important to them. That is going to be far more effective than us sitting down with that. So the most important thing is to know is that we do need you. We do need your family to come. And I hope I can give you kind of some encouragement in that, because the most important thing that you can do when you sit down with an elected official is not to recite the talking points, not to point to evidence, not to present the most philosophically sound argument, even though those are great. The most powerful thing you can do is to tell your personal story, to explain to your elected official why you are pro-life. Why is this issue your number one political issue? Explain to them why it's important to you. Explain that you donate your time to these other organizations. Explain to them how you've reached out to help pregnant women in your community, and you've seen the need to have these rules that protect women from the predatory abortion industry. You are more influential in their office whenever you're just honest, when you just tell them why this is important. You don't have to go in there and have everything straight. You don't have to have a PowerPoint presentation. You don't have to have colored handouts for everyone. Going and explaining why you're passionate about it is extremely effective. And even if you're talking to the most apathetic politician you've ever met, at the end of the day, you have the power of voting. You as the citizens, I'm never going to vote for, if I go into one of your representatives' offices, I'm never going to vote for them. I don't live here. I live in Austin, unfortunately. Okay? You have the power. You're the ones who are going to have to vote for that for that politician again. You're going to have to be voting for that senator again. And that's how our system works, and it empowers you to go. So they do listen. They do care when constituents come. I've been in the hallway with representatives before, and they get a call from their office that a room full of constituents just walked in and they said, hey, I got to go. I mean, they know who their boss is. At the very least, they have to go shake some hands and kiss some babies and let their constituents, be happy with them. But that's a good thing. I think of a time during Senate Bill 303, last session, there was a very dangerous bill that Texas Right to Life actually opposed, and we actually had to work to stop this bill. And one of the most influential things that we did was educational. This bill was being marketed as an improvement upon current law, and it was definitely not an improvement. It actually made the current law even worse. And so what we did is, the best thing we did was educate the citizens. And as soon as we started educating the citizens not to believe in the talking points, not to believe in what the Texas Medical Association was saying about the bill, they started, the citizens started calling their elected officials. And I remember we walked into one office, and there were 3 staffers in the front room. Jim, Elizabeth, and me were sitting in the room, and we just walked into the office, and they had 3 staffers were all on the phone, and they had legal notepads in front of them with a big line in the middle, for and against, and they had the marks. And thankfully, that we were winning on the against, that the pro-life citizens were calling and telling them, do not vote for that bill. Do not vote for Senate Bill 303 that will put vulnerable patients in a more dangerous position. And these poor staffers, I don't know how long they had been doing this, they were sitting there taking the call, yes ma'am, thank you for your call, I appreciate your concern, hang up, mark, pick up the other line. Yes ma'am, thank you for calling. The same thing, just over and over. They were writing down what their constituents thought about the bill. So you are effective. The second one is to do your research. If you go and meet with an elected official and just say vote pro-life, They're going to tell you, absolutely. They're going to tell you that they're completely pro-life. They're the most pro-life person you've ever met. I've met about 500 most pro-life people I've ever met in the Capitol. Every office tells me that. Oh, I'm the most pro-life person you've ever met. Now, I can't vote for that bill specifically, House Bill 2, but I'm the most pro-life person you've ever met. So you need to do research, and you have great resources at your fingertips. You have the Texas Leadership Coalition here. You have Texas Right to Life. You have other pro-life organizations to look at to see what are the bills. And so doing a little research before you do it, and taking those resources with you. You don't have to memorize all of this. Print an article off of our site, underline a few things that you want to emphasize in that meeting, and go in there and use your resources and tell them, these are the 3 bills I want you to vote for. These are the 3 bills I want you to support. So do a little bit of research is the second one. The third one is to be personal. Be yourself. Tell your story. Don't try to give a speech. Don't try, don't try to be a lawyer or a scientist, unless you actually are a lawyer or a scientist. If you are a lawyer or a scientist, come talk to me, because I need you to help us. But just to be honest, just to tell them why you care about this bill. We're going to be working on a piece of legislation that will protect pregnant minors. Right now, pregnant minors can go to a judge instead of her parents to get permission for an abortion. So we're talking about 14-year-old, 15-year-old girl can go before a complete stranger, a judge, and explain why she thinks she needs this abortion without even telling her parents. We're going to be closing up the loopholes to make sure that the court's actually helping the girl through any abuse that there may be, or just to stop the abortion industry from being a predator to that minor and convincing her that she doesn't even need to bother her parents with this decision. We're going to be, we're going to be pushing this law forward. We're going to be working on this law next year. And what I need is, if you could, what we need to have this victory is for you to go and explain to your elected officials from a parental viewpoint why parental rights are so important. To talk about struggles that you've had with your children, and how even maybe personal stories when you were a minor, knowing that you didn't want to get your parents involved in tough decisions. But those personal stories are what is going to sell those elected officials, not a legal theory, not a philosophical argument that we may be giving them. But we need those personal stories, so be personal. And the last one is to use the right tools. It's easier, right now it's easier to follow the political process, to follow legislation more than ever. We have, with the internet, we have the Texas legislature online site that can tell you where a specific bill is at every point of the process. Texas Right to Life, we have a Facebook, a Twitter, we have a website always updating during the session where we are with our legislation. So you can always know where your legislation that you care about is and how you can be effective. So there's several ways, and we've already alluded to them at the very beginning, but there are several ways that you can get involved with supporting a piece of legislation or an agenda. You can use Facebook or Twitter. You can find your elected officials on Facebook or Twitter. Make sure you follow them. Send them messages on there. You can email your elected officials why you care about a piece of legislation or why you would like to see a certain agenda promoted. You can call them. These are in order of influence, by the way. So just for those who are my age, Twitter was the first one, the least influential. If it's the easiest, it's probably the least influential, just kind of a rule of thumb. So a call is even more impactful to actually talk to a staffer, actually explain to them that so that they can put you down and write your name down on that you care about this issue. The next influential one is to come to the Capitol, to come on a pro-life lobby day, to come come to the Capitol on a big pro-life day, or for certain events like committee hearings. Each of these pro-life bills will, Lord willing, have a committee hearing where we actually hear the elected officials hear testimony for and against the bills. You being there in that committee is extremely influential, but the most influential thing you can do is to meet with your elected official. To meet with them, try to sit in front of your representative. try to meet with your senator. And sometimes it's not possible because they are on the floor or they're on committees, in committees, and so you can sit down with a staff. But that is by and far the most influential thing you can do as a pro-lifer. Looking at an individual, looking at a representative face to face and telling him, when I go vote for your re-election, this is the most important thing to me. Okay? That is the most influential thing you can do. So, be respectful of them. Tell them why you care about this issue. Tell them what the issue is. Don't assume they know all the pro-life bills out there. Providing them with some materials, and then asking them. This is one thing. Don't just go give them your life story and walk out. Ask them, do you support House Bill 2? Do you support this legislation protecting pregnant minors? Asking them for an answer. And that's kind of just a concrete suggestion. And the last thing is offer them resources. If you found something helpful on a pro-life website, print it out. Offer to send it to them. If you have written up your personal pro-life testimony, give it to them. Let them have a copy of that. So those are the types of things. Those are like the types of concrete things that we can do, and most influential of being in Austin. Texas Right to Life will be in the Capitol from January until the end of May. Lord willing, possibly further than that if that's what it takes to pass pro-life legislation. But we'll be there. So come partner with us. Come help us. Tell your elected officials to vote for the pro-life agenda, to support these specific bills so that we can actually continue the victory, that we can actually reach out and protect more pregnant women from a predatory abortion industry, that we can actually protect preborn children who are victims to elective abortion, and actually reach out and save these patients, these vulnerable patients who are being victimized in our very own hospitals. So appreciate that. If there's any questions, I can take a few, but thank you for your time, and feel free to use Texas Right to Life as a resource. We have a website, Facebook, Twitter, and come see me afterwards if you need more details. So thank you. I think there's a few questions, so please.
Do you know anything about the Gardasil shots more than I do? Somebody I know that I love took those 3 shots, and she was a teenager. She is a teenager. Do you know anything about it?
No, ma'am, I'm sorry. I'd love to talk to you after that.
That's what they're...
Yes, sir.
I guess I'll just give you everything at once, and then you can adjust it. Just one comment is that we take the innocent until proven guilty thing, a person until proven otherwise. They both deal with being sentenced to death potentially, so we ought to maybe take the analogy. But number 2 is minor parental notification legislation. Is that pertaining to both parents, and what if they're divorced? And the last one is dealing with our representatives, the ones who are entrenched, pro-choice, pro-abortion. In other words, how do we approach them with the, not the wording when I vote for you next?
Right.
How do you deal with it?
Yeah,
when we
absolutely.
visit them or whatever?
That's great. Thank you for asking that. On the parental involvement legislation, currently Texas has both on the books. We have parental notification and parental consent on the books. However, the weakness of the law is that this option, this third option that I told you about, of allowing the minor, instead of talking to her parents or providing them notice, is to go to a judge. It's called judicial bypass. And that's specifically what we're trying to reform, what authority a judge has, and what judges specifically have that authority to give a minor permission without getting her parents involved. So that's it. Right now it's one parent in the law, and so the divorce issue wouldn't be a legal challenge there. And then to your other question about the pro-choice member, and this is great because we hear there's 2 sides of this. You could say, oh, my guy's pro-life. I heard him speak at this event and he was extremely pro-life. I don't need to go bother him. I don't need to go to his office. Well, even our most pro-life representatives need your support. They need to be able to go to the floor and say that their vote, when they're under attack from the other side, that they can say, I've actually heard from my citizens. my voters actually came and told me why this issue is important to them, to help them, give them some cover for it, because that's their job. Remember, you are their boss. And so they actually need your pro-life individuals need your cover, and your pro-choice representatives need to hear from you as well. Because even though you may not have voted for that individual, they still are supposed to represent you. I live in Austin, and so I have I have an extremely openly pro-choice representative, and you know, we still need to meet with them. We still need to talk to them and explain to them our position and respect the office that they're in. And they also know how this system works is by voters telling their representatives where the position is. So still please meet with them, be respectful, give them information, tell them your personal side, and you don't have to be vindictive. And if they're doing their job and they're honorable elected officials, then they'll meet with you and at least hear you out. We can never underestimate the power of truth to turn hearts, and if not hearts, then maybe even a vote if they get into a political situation where they think they may need some more votes. So don't give up on any elected official on either side. So, yeah.
When it comes to voting for judges, there's precious little information that we have to guide us. We don't even know what party the individual is associated with. In reference to the judicial bypass, is there any way that we could get published in voter guides or what have you, the record of judges as to how many judicial bypasses they have approved and disapproved for the incumbent judges?
Yes, sir. So the answer is no. There's very poor reporting on the judicial bypass. There's actually no reporting required of the judicial bypass process, and that's one of the areas of reform, is that we're not getting the information about the specific cases, but we're at least finding out how prevalent this is. There's different numbers that we can kind of guess at by looking at different factors, but it's kind of, it's unsure of whether, how often this is working. On specific candidates, though, you are free to ask them. And they may be restricted on how they answer, but you can ask them. If they've been a sitting judge, then you can ask them how they think about these cases, what they think about the current law, if they think the current law is sufficient to give them, to help them protect these minors. You are free as a citizen to ask them anything, to ask them what they think about pregnant minors, what cases a pregnant minor would need to avoid parental rights in that case. And so candidate forums, even calling those candidates, emailing those candidates, trying to meet with them to ask them personally about those things. That's the most effective thing for judges, in my opinion. Maybe someone else has kind of more guidance on that.
We need to.
Okay. All right. I'll still be here for the rest of the afternoon, so please come talk to me. So thank you so much.
Thank you, John. Excellent presentation. Excellent presentation.